everyone, this is Rajat and you're watching me on Carbon Creations. In this video, I am going to be talking about one of the most important tools that artists use to make their drawings better. And if used correctly, this tool can take your drawings to a whole another level. That is, I'm going to be talking about the grid method. So if you find the video helpful, leave a big thumbs up, subscribe to this channel and don't forget to press the bell button as well, because this is just the first video of the many upcoming ones wherein I will be telling you about the entire process that I follow right from the beginning to the end to draw realistic portraits like these. So let's get started. So one of the most important things that you need to take care of while drawing anything is the proportions. You see, proportion is basically how one part of the drawing relates to the other one. Let's say you're drawing a human face, then the eyes that you're going to draw should be almost of the same size. If not, then it's going to look a bit awkward. So to get rid of that problem, artists use various methods, but I found the grid method to be really very helpful. Yes, it takes some time, it is time consuming, but it gives the results. So before we get into that, I need you guys to get these. These are just a bunch of school grade art supplies and you can easily get them at any local store. Once you do that, we'll move on to the next step. So the first thing that I obviously do is I lay out the grid on my reference pic that I need to draw. So you will need this app called Artist Grid. You can easily get that on the Play Store. Once you install it, just go to the app, open the reference pic that you want to draw. I will be drawing Walter White here. So once you do that, just tap on the three dots at top right corner, go to the settings, and you see there are a bunch of options here. Right now I'm concerned with setting up the number of rows and columns. If you have a closer look, you will see that I have ticked on the option of square grid cells. That way I just have to mention the number of rows and columns will be set itself. So let us start from a small number, let's say 5. Once you input that number, you will see that equivalent number of rows have been laid out. So basically there is now grid on your reference. Now problem arises that since the number of rows is quite small, the details that exist inside an individual grid cell are a lot. So basically there is a lot that could go wrong inside each grid cell. So to overcome that, all you need to do is you need to increase the number of rows. Let's say to 16. See, now the number of rows and columns has increased. Size of an individual grid cell has decreased. So there are not that much details inside an individual grid cell. So you can focus better, and that leaves almost no room for error. Yes, it might seem that these rows and columns are way too much, and yes, they will take some time, but trust the process. This is going to keep your proportions in check. So once you have laid out grid, we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so once you have laid out grid on the reference pic, next step is to draw a grid on the drawing paper. I suggest using a chart paper or cartridge paper, because that way you don't have to worry about size of the paper that you are going to draw on. Once you can just get started from any one corner of the sheet, and later on you can cut that portion out. Once you do that enough times, you will have pretty good idea about the size of paper that you're going to use. As you can already see that I have cut this portion out. So this process is one of the major benefits of using grid method, is that you can easily upscale or downscale portrait that you're going to draw. Let's say the reference pic that you have taken has grid cells of 1 centimeter each, then you can easily upscale, you can easily make the portrait twice its original size just by drawing grid cells of 2 centimeter each. So taking the size of the grid cells is all on you. Here I am going to be drawing grid cells of 1.5 centimeter each. So that process is pretty straightforward. You just take the ruler, start from one of the edges and mark places at 1.5 centimeter each, because that is what scale I am That is what I'm going to be using. So once you are done with one of the edges, you can move on to the next one. In the similar manner, you have to cover all the edges with these marks at 1.5 centimeter each. So once you have placed all the marks at an interval of 1.5 centimeter each, next you are going to join them all. So basically you have to join the first mark on the top edge with the first mark at the bottom edge. Same goes for the left and right edges as well. So just look at the corresponding marks on opposite edges of the paper and join them. While drawing the grid lines, you also have to remember that the lines should not be too light and they shouldn't be too dark as well. Here I am drawing them a bit darker so that the lines are easily visible to you. Here you can see that I have drawn grid on my drawing paper. Now I need to draw portrait in it. So for that, just take your reference pick and carefully observe each and everything. The grid is there for your rescue, so just focus on an individual grid cell at a time. And where you want to start from is completely your choice. Here I am going to be drawing from his spectacles. One way to draw is to start drawing from the top. That way you can avoid smudging of the pencil lines. So to start, you need to count the grid cells from where the spectacle is starting. So it's starting from 1, 2, 3 and 4. So the spectacle is starting from the 4th grid cell in the reference pick. Obviously you need to mark that place on your drawing paper as well. So just count from the top and go to the 4th grid cell and mark it. Similarly, the spectacle is in the 1st grid cell from the left edge. So mark that as well. Once you do that, you can just begin drawing. Now, one of the most important things that you need to take care of while drawing realism, while drawing realistic drawings, is that you need to observe the reference pick every once in a while. Observation is really very important, so just keep looking at it every once in a while. If you will have a closer look, you will see that I am drawing very dark lines. You should not do that. I am doing this just to make things more visible for you. But remember that these lines are eventually going to blend in with the tones that we fill in. So the lighter they are, the easier it will be to blend the tones. But don't make the lines too light as well, because if you do that, you might end up smudging them all before you begin filling in the tones. And if you are wondering how you are going to erase the grid lines later on, don't worry about that. We will cover that in the next section. Right now, just focus on putting in the basic details. This is a very important part of drawing the portrait. Okay, so once you follow all the previous mentioned steps properly, you will get the final result as something like this. So that is all about how you can use the grid method to draw the basic outline of portrait, or anything for that matter that you are wanting to draw. But here is an extra tip that I use while drawing portraits, and I find it really helpful. You see, other than the grid lines that you have drawn on your drawing paper, there are some inbuilt reference points as well, and these reference points exist inside each individual grid cell. For instance, let us consider this part of the drawing, this wrinkle over here. On having a closer look, you will find that with respect to this grid cell, the wrinkle is passing somewhere from the middle of the grid cell. So what I am trying to say is, inside all the individual grid cells, there are these midpoints of every grid line. Use them as reference points. Use them for your own benefit. Just see how the lines are behaving, how they curve, around these middle points. That way you can make your proportions, the proportions of your drawing, even better. Okay, one frequent question that I get from you guys or anyone who is trying to use the grid method is how do we erase the grid lines? Let me tell you that initially when I started using these grid lines for drawing portraits, one of the things that I did wrong was that I wanted to erase all the grid lines at once. That is completely wrong. Before I get into that, just know that it really helps if you start shading from the top part of the portrait. That way you can gradually build up the tones from top to bottom and you don't have to worry about the pencil marks getting smudged from your hands. So I really prefer that, but if you prefer drawing individual parts of the face like other artists, go with it, but just make sure to place a thin sheet of paper beneath your hands so that the pencil marks do not get smudged by your hands. That being said, once you start shading from a particular part of the portrait, just erase these grid lines and make them very light, so light that they can easily blend in with the shades that you are going to put. So once you have completed this grid cell, move on to the next one, erase it, make the grid lines really light, then move on to the next one. This way just go on gradually building up tones, one cell at a time. You can take more than one cell as well, that's up to you, but what I'm trying to say is don't go on erasing the entire grid cells all at once. That will not work well for you. One last thing that you need to be really careful about is at this point there are not much details in the portrait, so you might find it a bit awkward. Like in this one I feel like this spectacle and this spectacle are not properly aligned, but if you have properly used the grid method, if you have properly placed the pencil marks according to the reference pick, you don't have to worry about anything. Remember, realism is not about drawing what you think is right, it's about drawing whatever you see. So just try your best to copy the pencil marks from the reference pick as accurately as possible and your portrait will be well and good.